What is up? Welcome back to my channel. In honor of Tracheostomy Awareness Week, I am going to continue to educate you about what a trach is and why people have them. In this video, I'm going to tell you the 5 most common questions I get about trachs. As you know, on my channel, I love to educate people on how to understand people with disabilities and special needs. And I think the best way to do that is by asking questions. If you saw me out and about with my daughter, Noelle, who's in a wheelchair, I would love if you came up and asked me questions. Now, you do have to ask them appropriately and in the right way. But in this video, I want to educate you more about my daughter and about trachs. The first question: why do people have trachs? Well, people can have trachs for a whole number of different reasons. Some of them being airway problems, trachea problems like the structure of their trachea, lung disease, neuromuscular disease, accidents, prematurity, and if you're in a coma. Those are some of the main reasons that people would have a trach. And how do I know so much about trachs? Well, I've had a daughter, Noelle, who's had a trach for 11 years, so I've learned a lot about trachs. The second question I get is, can you eat with a trach? And the answer is yes, you absolutely can eat with a trach. The trach actually goes into your trachea, not into your esophagus, so you can swallow and eat food because the food is going down your esophagus. Now, you may have extra complications for why you have a trach in the first place, and that might interfere with your ability to eat. In my daughter's case, she was unable to eat since she was a baby. She had a feeding tube at 5 months, so she's never learned to eat. So she still eats through a feeding tube. But having a trach does not necessarily mean that you cannot eat. Question number 3, can you talk with a trach? And the answer is yes, you absolutely can talk with a trach. The trach should sit below your vocal cords so that you're still able to vocalize around it. Now again, it depends on the reason for the trach. If you have a trach because, like my daughter, you have very low muscle tone, you may not be able to breathe enough to vocalize around the trach. Or if there's an airway obstruction where your esophagus is very small, you might not be able to get any sound out above it. Because basically, if somebody has a trach, they're having to get their lungs and their volume up around the trach and to come out. A great way for people to be able to talk with the trach is called a passi-mir valve or a speaking valve. That basically stops the air from going out of the trach, so that way it will go up through the vocal cords and out the mouth. Now again, in Noelle's case, she actually has a paralyzed vocal cord, so she cannot talk, and it was not because of a complication from her trach or being intubated, it was actually from birth. So on top of everything else, Noelle has a paralyzed vocal cord, so she cannot communicate, but children with trachs are able, or adults are able, to communicate with a trach. The number 4 question we get all the time is, why is Noelle on a ventilator? Because her trach, she has a tube connected to it because the ventilator actually breathes for her. Now, Noelle doesn't have any airway obstruction. She doesn't have any physical reason for needing a trach. She needs the trach for ventilation so that it can fill her lungs. And a lot of people actually do have trachs in order to have ventilation, especially kiddos with neuromuscular or low tone. Then there's a whole host of other reasons why kiddos have trachs or what could be attached to a trach. Some kids just have oxygen, so it's a little piece clipped onto it with an oxygen hose going into it. Some kids just have a filter on it that just helps to moisturize the air they breathe, because a trach, when you're breathing into your lungs, it's missing your nose. And your nose is actually what moistens the air and humidifies it basically to go to your lungs. And when you're cutting off the nose piece of it, you need something extra to humidify your lungs. And so you may see an HME, which is a humidifier, a little tiny like filter humidifier, something like that attached to the trach. There is also a trach collar, where there is a collar over your trach and humidified air is going into it. You may see that. So there's lots of different things that may be attached to the trach for lots of different reasons. And question number 5 is, can you get rid of a trach? Yes, you can get rid of a trach. It's called decannulation, and it means that they've taken the trach out because the patient doesn't need it anymore for whatever reason. Either maybe they healed or they've grown enough, their airway's grown, they're strong enough now, they don't need extra ventilation. So when the day comes, and it's a very exciting day for those that get to experience it, Then the child goes in and they take the trach out, and either the stoma, which is the hole that's been created in the throat, it will close on its own with a Band-Aid over it, and it'll close in just a few days, or they might need to put a couple stitches in it so that it will close completely. So those are the 5 most common questions we've had about trachs. Now, trach care, that's a whole nother scenario, a whole nother video for another day. But if you want to stay tuned, my next video is going to be all about a day in the life of with my family and Noelle, just going out and about and experiencing what a day in our life looks like. So you can be watching for that video. Thanks. Have a great day.